A night that changed everything. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Pearl Hotel sparkled like stars against the midnight blue ceiling. Natalie Rivers balanced a silver tray loaded with champagne glasses, weaving through the crowd of wealthy guests with practiced grace. Her black uniform was crisp, her hair pulled back in the tight bun that Margaret Hayes, the event manager, insisted upon. After 5 years working these events, Natalie had become invisible, just another server in a world where people like her only mattered when they needed something. Tonight's charity gala was different though. The guest list read like a who's who of American power and wealth. Natalie recognized faces from magazine covers and television interviews. But one face stood out among them all: Jackson Westbrook, the tech billionaire whose company had revolutionized cloud computing and whose real estate empire stretched across 3 continents. The desperate request. Natalie had just finished serving a group of socialites when she felt someone watching her. She turned to find Jackson Westbrook standing uncomfortably close, his tailored tuxedo fitting him perfectly, his dark hair slightly disheveled as if he had been running his hands through it. His green eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I need your help," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the string quartet playing in the corner. "And I know this will sound absolutely crazy." Natalie clutched her tray tighter, her professional instincts telling her to politely excuse herself. "Sir, if you need something, I can get one of the managers." "No," Jackson said quickly, taking a small step closer. His cologne was subtle but expensive, something woody and clean. "I need you to pretend to kiss me. Right now. For about 10 minutes. Natalie blinked, certain she had misheard him. "Excuse me?" Jackson glanced toward the entrance where a stunning woman in a golden dress was making her way through the crowd like a predator stalking prey. Her diamond necklace caught the light with every step, and her eyes were fixed on Jackson with an unsettling determination. "That woman is Veronica Ashford," Jackson explained rapidly. "My ex-girlfriend. She refuses to accept that we're over, and tonight I have crucial business negotiations happening. If she causes a scene or makes it look like we're reconciling, it could destroy a deal I've been working on for 2 years. I've tried everything to make her understand, but she won't listen to simple words." The kiss that stopped time. Natalie should have walked away. Every professional bone in her body screamed that this was wrong, dangerous, a line she should never cross. Margaret Hayes had drilled into every server that guests were to be served, not befriended. Certainly not kissed. But something in Jackson's eyes stopped her. It was not arrogance or entitlement. It was genuine desperation, the kind of vulnerability that did not match his public image at all. And Veronica Ashford was getting closer, her expression hardening as she spotted Jackson. Without thinking it through, Natalie set down her tray on a nearby table. She stepped close to Jackson, closer than she had ever been to someone like him, and placed her hand gently on his cheek. "You'll explain everything later," she whispered, more to convince herself than him. Then she kissed him. Natalie had expected it to be quick, awkward, a simple press of lips to sell the illusion. But Jackson responded with a tenderness that caught her completely off guard. His hand found the small of her back, pulling her closer but not roughly. His other hand came up to cradle her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. The kiss deepened naturally, and for a moment, Natalie forgot where they were. She forgot the watching crowd, forgot her role, forgot everything except the warmth of his lips and the way her heart was racing. When they finally pulled apart, the entire ballroom had gone silent. Natalie could feel hundreds of eyes on them, could sense the shock rippling through the crowd like a wave. Among all those stares, the most intense belonged to Veronica Ashford, whose perfect face had transformed into a mask of fury, confrontation and consequences. "Who is she, Jackson?" Veronica demanded, closing the distance between them with swift steps. Her voice carried across the silent room, and people pretended not to stare while hanging on every word. Natalie felt her face burning. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never return. But Jackson's hand remained on her waist, steady and reassuring. "Veronica, I'd like you to meet Natalie," Jackson said calmly, his voice carrying none of the desperation from moments before. "My girlfriend." The word hung in the air like a bomb. Natalie's mind reeled. Girlfriend? That had not been part of any plan. She opened her mouth to speak, but Jackson's fingers pressed gently against her side, a silent plea to go along with it. Veronica looked Natalie up and down with barely concealed contempt. "A waitress," she said, making the word sound like an insult. "Really, Jackson? You expect anyone to believe you're dating the help?" The comment stung more than Natalie wanted to admit. She had heard variations of it her whole life, from people who looked at her uniform and decided they knew everything about her worth as a human being. "What I expect," Jackson replied, his voice cooling by several degrees, "is for you to accept that we ended 3 years ago. What Natalie does for a living has nothing to do with why I care about her." The aftermath. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Natalie. Jackson kept her close, introducing her to various guests with a pride that felt disturbingly genuine. She smiled, made small talk, and tried to ignore the whispers that followed them everywhere. But her mind kept returning to one terrifying thought: what had she just gotten herself into? When Margaret Hayes pulled her aside during a brief moment alone, Natalie knew the reckoning had come. "My office." "Now," Margaret said, her voice clipped and cold. The office was on the second floor, away from the glamour of the event spaces. Margaret closed the door and turned to face Natalie with an expression that could freeze water. "In 30 years of managing events," Margaret began, her words measured and sharp, "I have never seen such unprofessional behavior. Fraternizing with guests is absolutely forbidden. Do you understand how serious this is?" Natalie nodded, shame washing over her. "I understand, and I'm truly sorry. It was a mistake. A mistake that Mr. Westbrook has taken full responsibility for," Margaret continued, and Natalie's head snapped up in surprise. "He called me 20 minutes ago. He insisted that he put you in an impossible position and that any consequences should fall on him, not you." Natalie felt a strange mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. She did not want Jackson fighting her battles, did not want to be another charity case for a wealthy man to fix. "I'm not firing you," Margaret said finally, though her expression remained stern. "But you're on thin ice, Rivers. One more incident like this, and I won't care what Jackson Westbrook says. You'll be gone. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." The garden meeting. The gala finally ended near midnight. Natalie had changed out of her uniform into jeans and a simple sweater, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She should have gone straight home to her mother, who would be waiting up despite her illness. Instead, she found herself walking toward the hotel's back garden, toward the fountain where Jackson had asked to meet her. He was already there, leaning against the stone edge of the fountain, his jacket discarded and his bow tie hanging loose. In the soft glow of the garden lights, he looked less like a billionaire and more like an ordinary man, tired and uncertain. "I thought you might not come," he said when he saw her. "I thought about it," Natalie admitted, keeping a careful distance between them. "But you owe me an explanation. A real one." Jackson nodded, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. And I'm sorry for putting you in that position. The truth is, Veronica and I broke up 3 years ago, but she's never accepted it. Our families have intertwined business interests, which makes it complicated. Recently, she's been more aggressive about trying to get back together, and tonight was critical. I have Japanese investors evaluating a joint venture, and if Veronica had caused a scene or made it look like we were reconciling, it would have sent the wrong message." "So you used me," Natalie said flatly. "Yes," Jackson admitted, and his honesty surprised her. "But not randomly. I watched you work all evening. You handled difficult guests with grace, you were professional without being cold, and you had this quality that I can't quite name. Authenticity, maybe. Everyone else here tonight was playing a role, trying to impress or manipulate or gain something. You were just doing your job well. Natalie wanted to stay angry, but his words touched something in her. What happens now? Tomorrow everyone will know that kiss was fake. Jackson was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the dim light. Actually, I have a proposition. And before you say no, please hear me out. The proposal. I need you to continue pretending to be my girlfriend, Jackson said, his words coming quickly now. For 3 months, maybe less. Just long enough for the investor deal to close and for Veronica to finally accept that I've moved on. I'll compensate you generously, we'll have a formal contract with clear terms, and everything will be completely professional. Natalie stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. You want to hire me to fake date you? I know it sounds insane, Jackson said. But think about it. I need someone who won't be blinded by my money or name, someone who can maintain perspective that this is a business arrangement. You need money, I'm guessing, based on the fact that you're working double shifts according to the staff schedule I saw. The observation should have annoyed her, but it was accurate. Her mother's medical bills were crushing, and her salary barely covered rent and basic expenses. How much are we talking about? Natalie asked, hating how mercenary the question sounded but needing to be practical. Jackson named a figure that made her head spin. It was more than she made in a year, possibly 2 years. I need to think about it, Natalie said finally. This is crazy and complicated, and I don't jump into things without considering all the angles. Fair enough, Jackson agreed. He pulled out a business card and held it out to her. My personal number. Call me when you decide. Natalie took the card, feeling the weight of expensive paper between her fingers. As she walked away from the garden and toward the reality of her small apartment and her sleeping mother, she could not shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she could not possibly predict. The question was whether that change would save her or destroy her, the decision. 3 days passed before Natalie called Jackson. 3 days of sleepless nights, watching her mother struggle with pain that the current medication barely touched. 3 days of calculating bills, counting pennies, and weighing the risk of stepping into a world that was never meant for people like her. Diana Rivers sat on their worn couch, wrapped in a faded quilt despite the warm afternoon. At 52, she looked older than her years, the autoimmune disease stealing her vitality bit by bit. She had worked at hotels just like the Grand Pearl for 30 years before her body gave out, and she had taught Natalie everything about dignity and hard work. You're thinking about that man's offer, Diana said, not looking up from the magazine she was pretending to read. Mothers always knew. Natalie sat beside her, taking her mother's thin hand. The money would cover your new treatment. The one Dr. Patterson mentioned. It could actually help, Mom. Diana finally looked at her daughter, brown eyes still sharp despite the illness. And what would it cost you? Not just money, sweetheart. What would it cost your heart? The question cut deeper than Natalie wanted to admit. It's just business. A contract. 3 months of attending events and pretending to smile. I've been smiling for difficult people my whole life. The difference is this one made you feel something, Diana said gently. I saw your face when you came home that night. You kissed him like it meant something. Natalie pulled away, standing to pace their small living room. It was acting. That's all it was. Then call him, Diana said simply. Take the money, help me, help yourself. Just promise me one thing. Promise you'll be honest with yourself about what you're feeling. The worst lies are the ones we tell ourselves. That evening, Natalie dialed Jackson's number. He answered on the second ring. It's Natalie, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'll do it. But I have conditions. Negotiating terms. They met at a quiet coffee shop in Central Park, far from the glittering world of the Grand Pearl. Jackson arrived exactly on time, dressed casually in dark jeans and a gray sweater that probably cost more than Natalie's monthly rent. He looked different outside of a tuxedo, more approachable, almost normal. Natalie had prepared a list in a small notebook. She opened it with deliberate care, needing the structure to feel in control. "First, I want a written contract reviewed by a lawyer of my choosing," she began. "With clear terms about what's expected, financial compensation, and how either of us can end the arrangement." Jackson nodded approvingly. "Absolutely. I'll have my legal team draft something this week. You take it to any attorney you want. Second, I keep my job at the Grand Pearl. I don't want handouts or a new career. When this ends, I need to have my own life to return to." "Understood," Jackson agreed. "Though I reserve the right to think you're selling yourself short." Natalie ignored the comment and continued. "Third, my mother stays completely out of this. She's private, she's vulnerable, and I won't have her dragged into any media attention or drama." Jackson's expression softened. "I wouldn't dream of it. In fact, I'd like to help with her medical expenses beyond what we agreed on. Consider it separate from our arrangement." "No," Natalie said firmly. "I don't want charity. The agreed amount is enough. Anything more would make me feel like I'm being bought." Jackson studied her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Some starry-eyed girl who would be grateful for your attention?" "Honestly? A little bit, yes." His honesty was disarming. "Most people in my life want something from me. You seem to want as little as possible." "I want to keep my dignity," Natalie said quietly. "That's worth more than anything you could offer." Learning the part. The contract arrived 5 days later, 15 pages of legal language that Natalie took to a small law office recommended by Caroline, her coworker at the hotel. The attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Foster, reviewed everything carefully. "This is surprisingly fair," Rebecca said, looking up from the document. "Whoever drafted this protected your interests almost as much as his. There's even a clause about emotional complications." Natalie leaned forward. "What kind of clause?" Rebecca read aloud. "If either party develops genuine romantic feelings beyond the scope of this professional agreement, that party must immediately disclose such feelings to the other. Both parties will then jointly decide whether to continue, modify, or terminate this arrangement." "That's ridiculous," Natalie said, though her heart beat faster. "This is business. Feelings won't be an issue." Rebecca gave her a knowing look. Famous last words. "But legally, you're protected. I'd say sign it." 2 days later, Natalie met Jackson at his downtown office to finalize everything. The building was all glass and steel, reaching into the sky like a crystal tower. Security escorted her to the top floor where Jackson's personal office occupied the entire space, with windows overlooking the city. "Impressive view," Natalie said, trying not to be intimidated by the obvious wealth surrounding her. Jackson handed her a pen. "It's just a building. Sign here and here." As Natalie signed her name, she felt like she was crossing a bridge she could never recross. The moment the ink dried, Jackson transferred 30% of the agreed amount to her bank account. Her phone buzzed with the notification, and Natalie stared at the number in disbelief. It was real. This was actually happening. "Now comes the hard part," Jackson said, sitting on the edge of his desk. "We need to prepare you for the Ashford dinner party next week. Veronica's family is hosting, and it's crucial that we appear convincingly together." Preparation and transformation. Over the next week, Jackson's world slowly opened to Natalie. He sent over information about the people she would meet, their backgrounds, their interests, topics to avoid. It felt like studying for an exam where failure meant public humiliation. The biggest challenge was clothing. Natalie refused Jackson's offer to hire a stylist, instead hunting through upscale consignment shops for something appropriate. She found a navy blue dress, simple but elegant, that had once belonged to someone who lived in Jackson's world. It fit perfectly, and when Natalie looked at herself in the mirror, she almost believed she could belong. Her mother's health improved dramatically with the new medication. The difference was visible within days. Diana had more energy, less pain, could actually get through a day without exhaustion crushing her. Watching her mother smile without grimacing made every uncomfortable moment of this arrangement worth it. "You look beautiful," Diana said the night of the Ashford dinner, helping Natalie with her hair. "But remember what I said. Be honest with yourself." Entering the lion's den. Jackson picked Natalie up in a sleek black car driven by a quiet man named Robert. Jackson himself looked devastating in a dark suit, his hair perfectly styled, every inch the billionaire the world expected. But when he saw Natalie, something shifted in his expression. "You look stunning," he said, and it did not sound like part of the act. "Thank you," Natalie replied, trying to ignore how her stomach flipped when he looked at her that way. The drive to the Ashford estate took 40 minutes. The mansion sat on acres of manicured grounds, lit up like a palace. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, and uniformed staff directed guests inside. "Remember," Jackson said quietly as they approached the entrance, "Veronica will try to rattle you. She's had years of practice in psychological warfare. Don't engage with her provocations." "I've dealt with difficult people before," Natalie reminded him. "Not like this," Jackson warned. "Veronica doesn't just want to win. She wants to destroy." Inside, the mansion was everything Natalie expected. Marble floors, priceless art, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than her childhood home. Guests mingled in evening wear, their jewelry catching the light, their laughter practiced and perfect. Heads turned when they entered. Whispers followed them through the crowd. Natalie felt every eye assessing her, judging her, finding her lacking. But Jackson's hand stayed steady on her lower back, anchoring her. The performance. They made their way through the crowd, Jackson introducing Natalie to various business associates and socialites. She smiled, made polite conversation, and tried to remember everything he had told her about each person. To her surprise, many were genuinely friendly, curious about the woman who had captured Jackson Westbrook's attention. "I heard you're studying design," said Amanda Preston, a gallery owner Jackson had mentioned. "What's your focus?" Natalie blinked, confused. She had never told Jackson about her abandoned dreams of becoming an interior designer. "I actually put that on hold when my mother got sick. But I used to focus on sustainable residential spaces." "Fascinating," Amanda said warmly. "You should come by my gallery. We're doing an exhibition on architecture and environmental design next month." As they moved through the party, Natalie realized Jackson had done more than give her information about others. He had clearly researched her as well, mentioning details about her life that made her seem more interesting, more worthy of being by his side. Then Veronica appeared. She glided through the crowd in a crimson dress that probably cost more than a car, her blonde hair swept up to showcase diamond earrings. Her smile was predatory as she approached. "Jackson, darling," Veronica purred, completely ignoring Natalie. "Father wants to introduce you to the Tanaka group. They're in the East Salon." "I'll find them shortly," Jackson replied coolly. "Veronica, you remember Natalie?" Veronica's blue eyes finally landed on Natalie, cold and assessing. "The waitress." "Of course. Tell me, dear, are you still serving drinks, or has Jackson set you up with something more suitable?" The condescension dripped from every word. Natalie felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she remembered Jackson's warning. "I still work at the Grand Pearl," Natalie said evenly. "I enjoy my job." "How refreshingly simple," Veronica replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Most women in your position would be looking for upgrades. But I suppose some people are content with where they are." "Some people measure success differently than you do," Natalie found herself saying. "Not everyone needs luxury to feel worthwhile." Veronica's smile froze. For just a moment, something dangerous flashed in her eyes. How philosophical. Jackson always did have a weakness for charity cases. It makes him feel noble. That's enough, Veronica, Jackson said, his voice dropping to a tone Natalie had never heard from him. It was ice and steel. Unexpected chemistry. After Veronica swept away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and barely veiled threats, Jackson guided Natalie toward a quieter corner of the mansion. They found themselves in a library, walls lined with books that probably had never been read, furniture that existed more for show than comfort. "I'm sorry," Jackson said, his hand still on her waist. "She was worse than I expected." "I've handled worse," Natalie said, though her hands were shaking slightly. "Working in service, you develop thick skin." Jackson turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You were brilliant. The way you stood up to her without being cruel. That's exactly what she didn't expect." They were standing close, closer than necessary. Natalie could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them wanted to name. "We should get back," Natalie said, stepping away before she did something foolish. "People will notice we're gone." But as they returned to the party, Natalie could not shake the feeling that something had shifted. The line between performance and reality was starting to blur, and that terrified her more than any confrontation with Veronica Ashford ever could. The rest of the evening passed in a careful dance. Jackson introduced her to Mr. Tanaka and his associates, Japanese investors whose body language suggested they were impressed by Jackson's apparent stability. Having a girlfriend, particularly one who seemed grounded and genuine, was clearly working in his favor. As the night ended and they drove back toward Natalie's neighborhood, both were quiet. The city lights streamed past the car windows, and Natalie felt exhausted from the constant performance. "You did perfectly tonight," Jackson said as they pulled up to her building. "Better than I hoped." "It felt strange," Natalie admitted. "Pretending to be someone I'm not." Jackson looked at her seriously. "I don't think you were pretending to be someone else. I think you were just showing a side of yourself you usually keep hidden." Before Natalie could respond, he leaned over and kissed her cheek, a gentle gesture that felt both planned and spontaneous. "Good night, Natalie. I'll call you tomorrow." As Natalie climbed the stairs to her apartment, her cheek still warm where his lips had touched, she remembered her mother's warning. "Be honest with yourself about what you're feeling." The problem was, Natalie was not sure she wanted to be honest. The truth was starting to scare her. Dangerous patterns. 6 weeks into their arrangement, Natalie's life had transformed in ways she never anticipated. She still worked at the Grand Pearl, though Margaret Hayes watched her with perpetual suspicion. But her evenings belonged to Jackson's world: gallery openings, business dinners, charity functions. Each event required her to smile, to charm, to play the role of devoted girlfriend to a man she was supposed to keep at arm's length. The problem was that Jackson was not making it easy to maintain distance. He remembered details about her that Natalie had only mentioned once. He sent flowers to her mother with notes that made Diana smile. He asked about Natalie's abandoned design dreams and actually listened to her answers. Worst of all, he looked at her sometimes like she was not part of a business transaction but someone he genuinely cared about. "You're getting too comfortable," Caroline warned during a shift at the hotel. Her friend had watched the transformation with growing concern. "I see how you light up when he texts. That's not what business arrangements look like." "I'm just doing my job," Natalie insisted, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. The truth was more complicated. Every dinner together became easier, more natural. Their conversations moved beyond the superficial details they needed for public appearances. Jackson told her about the loneliness of wealth, how everyone wanted something from him, how exhausting it was to never know if people's interest was genuine. Natalie shared her fears about her mother's health, her guilt about putting dreams on hold, her frustration with a world that measured worth by bank accounts. They were becoming friends, maybe more, and that was not part of the contract. The turning point. The crisis came on a Friday evening. Jackson had invited Natalie to a private dinner at his penthouse apartment, something they had avoided until now. Public events felt safer, with built-in endpoints and witnesses. Private dinners were dangerous territory. The penthouse was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that somehow felt warm rather than cold. Jackson had cooked, which surprised Natalie until he admitted he found it relaxing, a way to escape the demands of his public life. "I didn't know billionaires cooked their own meals," Natalie teased, accepting a glass of wine. This billionaire spent 2 years after college backpacking through Europe, working in kitchens to pay for hostels, Jackson replied. "My father nearly disowned me for it." They ate pasta that Jackson had made from scratch, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed like water, easy and natural. Natalie found herself laughing at his stories about disastrous business meetings and cultural misunderstandings. Jackson listened intently when she described her dream of designing affordable housing that was still beautiful and sustainable. After dinner, they moved to the balcony. The city stretched out below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives. The autumn air was cool, and Jackson draped his jacket over Natalie's shoulders without thinking. 2 more weeks, Jackson said quietly. "The Tanaka deal closes next Friday. After that, our contract is fulfilled." The words should have brought relief. Instead, Natalie felt something twist in her chest. "Then Veronica will finally leave you alone?" "Hopefully. She's been quieter lately. I think she's finally accepting reality." Jackson turned to look at Natalie directly. "Which means you'll get your life back. No more pretending, no more uncomfortable events." "Right," Natalie agreed, but her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Back to normal." Jackson moved closer, his expression serious. "Natalie, I need to tell you something. This contract we signed, it had that clause about developing feelings. About being honest if things changed." Natalie's heart began to race. "Jackson, don't." "I have to," he continued, his voice low. "Because I've broken the terms. This stopped being pretend for me weeks ago. Maybe it never really was." The truth revealed. Before Natalie could respond, Jackson's phone rang. He glanced at it and his expression changed completely, all warmth draining from his face. "It's my head of security," he said, answering quickly. As he listened, his jaw tightened. "We'll be right there." "What's wrong?" Natalie asked, suddenly afraid. Jackson's eyes were hard when he looked at her. "Veronica has called a press conference. She's claiming I've been harassing her, using a fake relationship to humiliate her publicly. She has somehow obtained photos that she says prove our relationship is a fabricated business arrangement." Natalie felt the blood drain from her face. "How would she have photos?" "I don't know, but we need to get ahead of this now. My lawyers are already working on a response, but Natalie, this is going to get ugly. The media will dig into your life, your mother's illness, everything. Are you prepared for that?" The question hung between them. This was the moment that would define everything. Natalie could walk away, claim she had been deceived, protect herself and her mother from the storm that was coming. Or she could stand beside Jackson and face whatever Veronica threw at them. "What do you want me to do?" Natalie asked quietly. Jackson took her hands, his grip strong and sure. "I want you to tell the truth. Whatever that truth is for you. If this was just a business arrangement and nothing more, say that. I'll handle the fallout. But if it became something real, something neither of us planned, then maybe we face this together." Natalie looked into his eyes and finally admitted what she had been denying for weeks. "It became real. I don't know when exactly, but it stopped being an act. And that terrifies me, Jackson, because people like me don't end up with people like you. Not in real life. Says who? Jackson challenged. Veronica? Society? Those are rules written by people who want to keep others in their place. I don't care about any of that. I care about you. The real you, not the role you've been playing. Standing together. The press conference happened 2 hours later at the Ashford family estate. Veronica stood before a wall of cameras, her expression perfectly crafted to show hurt and betrayal. She displayed photos that had clearly been taken by a private investigator, images of Natalie and Jackson at various events with timestamps, transaction records that Veronica claimed proved their relationship was a business deal. Jackson Westbrook has humiliated me publicly, Veronica declared, her voice catching with practiced emotion. He hired this woman to pretend to be his girlfriend solely to torment me. It's cruel and manipulative, and the world deserves to know the truth about who he really is. The media erupted with questions. The story was already spreading across social platforms, trending worldwide within minutes. Waitress hired to fake relationship with Billionaire. The narrative was exactly what Veronica wanted, Jackson as the villain, Natalie as either victim or co-conspirator. Jackson's lawyers had arranged their own press conference for the next morning, but Jackson surprised everyone by calling reporters immediately. Within an hour, a smaller but significant group had assembled in the conference room of his office building. Natalie stood beside him, her hand in his, facing cameras and microphones and the judgment of millions. She wore one of her own simple dresses, not something bought for Jackson's world. If she was going to do this, she would do it as herself. It's true that Natalie and I initially agreed to appear as a couple to discourage unwanted attention from my ex-girlfriend, Jackson began, his voice steady and clear. That arrangement was documented and consensual. What Veronica's narrative deliberately omits is what happened after that initial agreement. He turned to look at Natalie, and the cameras captured the genuine emotion in his expression. We fell in love. Not because of money or status or any business advantage, but because we saw each other clearly. Natalie saw past my wealth to who I actually am. I saw past her circumstances to her incredible strength and character. Natalie found her voice, speaking directly to the cameras. I grew up watching my mother work in hotels, serving people who never really saw her. I learned that dignity is not about what you have but who you are. When Jackson asked for my help, it was supposed to be temporary, professional. But he treated me with respect I did not expect. He valued my opinions. He made me believe my dreams mattered. So you admit the relationship started as business? A reporter called out. It started as an arrangement, Natalie acknowledged. It became something real. Love does not always follow a straightforward path. Resolution and new beginning. The next few days were chaos. Media coverage was relentless, public opinion divided. Some called their relationship a modern fairy tale, others dismissed it as manipulation. Veronica gave interview after interview, painting herself as the victim. But slowly, the narrative began to shift. People who had worked with Jackson spoke up about his character. Diana gave one interview, her quiet dignity and obvious love for her daughter compelling. Even Margaret Hayes from the Grand Pearl made a statement defending Natalie's professionalism and work ethic. The Tanaka Group, initially concerned about the controversy, surprised everyone by moving forward with the deal. Mr. Tanaka released a statement saying he valued Jackson's honesty and that genuine human connection was worth more than manufactured perfection. 2 weeks after the press conference, Natalie and Jackson sat in the same coffee shop where they had negotiated their original contract. This time, there was no notebook, no terms to discuss. Just two people trying to figure out what came next. The contract expired yesterday, Jackson noted. Technically, you're free. Technically, Natalie agreed. But I don't think either of us wants to go back to how things were before. Jackson reached across the table, taking her hand. I want to try this for real. No contracts, no terms, no performance. Just us figuring things out as we go. It won't be easy. The media attention will continue. People will judge us. Veronica will probably never fully accept it. I know, Natalie said. But my mother taught me that anything worth having requires courage. This scares me, Jackson. Your world still intimidates me. I still worry about losing myself in it. Then don't, Jackson said simply. Keep your job if it grounds you. Pursue your design dreams. I don't want to change you. I fell in love with exactly who you are. Natalie smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. You know what's funny? This whole thing started because you needed someone to pretend to kiss you for 10 minutes. Now I cannot imagine not kissing you for real. Jackson laughed, the sound genuine and free. Best 10 minutes of my life. Worth every complication that followed. 6 months later. The design studio was small but perfect, nestled in a neighborhood between Jackson's world and Natalie's. The sign outside read, Rivers Design, sustainable spaces for everyone. Inside, Natalie worked on plans for affordable housing that balanced beauty with environmental responsibility. She still worked occasional shifts at the Grand Pearl, maintaining the connections and grounding that had shaped her. Jackson had learned to split his time between his empire and the quieter life Natalie needed, finding balance he had never thought possible. Diana's health continued to improve. She had moved into a better apartment, could finally travel a bit, was making up for years of being trapped by illness. Watching her mother laugh freely was worth everything Natalie had risked. Veronica had eventually moved on, finding a hedge fund manager whose pedigree and wealth satisfied her family's expectations. She still gave occasional interviews implying Jackson had made a mistake, but the venom had faded. She had found someone who fit her world better, and that was its own kind of resolution. One evening, Jackson arrived at Natalie's studio just as she was closing up. He had flowers, not the expensive arrangements he used to send but simple daisies from a street vendor. I have something for you, he said, pulling out a small box. Natalie's heart skipped. Jackson, if that's what I think it is, I need to tell you something first. It's not a ring, he assured her, smiling. Open it. Inside was a key. Natalie looked at him questioningly. It's to a building I bought, Jackson explained. In the neighborhood you've been looking at for your affordable housing project. The zoning is perfect, the location is ideal, and I'm donating it to your foundation. Consider it an investment in someone who's changing the world, one sustainable space at a time. Natalie felt tears well up, but they were happy tears this time. You're impossible. You know that? I learned from the best, Jackson replied, pulling her close. A waitress who shocked everyone by proving that love is not about status or wealth.